In the autumn of 9 AD, three of Rome's most prestigious legions, Legio 17, Sophites and 19 teams, along with 6 cohorts of auxiliary troops and 3 squadrons of cavalry, totaling approximately 20,000 men, marched into the dense forests of Germania under the command of Publius Quinctilius Varus. None would return. The disaster that befell them would echo through Roman history for centuries, marking the end of Augustus' dreams of a Germania Romana and establishing the Rhine as Rome's permanent northern frontier. This is the documented account of that catastrophe, drawn from the testimonies of Tacitus, Cassius Dio, Velleius Paterculus, and archaeological evidence uncovered at Calcrease, the probable site of the battle. It's a story of betrayal, tactical brilliance, and the limits of imperial ambition. Arminius was not born to destroy Rome. Indeed, for the first 30 years of his life, he served it faithfully. Born around 18 BC as Hermann, son of Segima, chief of the Cherusci tribe, he had been taken to Rome as a hostage in his youth, a common practice to ensure tribal loyalty. There, he received a Roman education, learned Latin, studied military tactics, and served with distinction in the Roman auxiliary forces. By 9 AD, Arminius had achieved equestrian rank and commanded Germanic auxiliary troops under Varus. He was trusted, respected, and appeared thoroughly Romanized. Tacitus would later describe him as the liberator of Germany. But in 9 AD, to Romanize, he seemed the perfect example of successful cultural assimilation. Yet beneath this Roman veneer, Arminius harbored a different vision. Historical sources suggest he had been secretly building a coalition among the Germanic tribes for years, exploiting growing resentment against Roman taxation, legal impositions, and cultural suppression. The Roman historian Velleius Paterculus, who knew both men personally, wrote that Arminius possessed a mind quick to conceive and bold to execute whatever he had conceived. The Germanic tribes Arminius united were not the primitive barbarians of Roman propaganda. The Cherusci, Marsi, Chatti, Bructeri, and other allied tribes possessed sophisticated military traditions, intimate knowledge of their terrain, and a burning desire to expel the Roman occupiers. Archaeological evidence from the period reveals advanced metalworking, complex social structures, and military equipment that, while different from Roman gear, was highly effective in forest warfare. Arminius's masterstroke was not merely military, but psychological. He understood that defeating Rome required more than winning battles. It required making the conquest of Germania so costly that even the mighty Roman Empire would abandon the effort. The plan he conceived would achieve exactly that. Publius Quinctilius Varus was, by most accounts, a capable administrator, but an inadequate general. Born into a patrician family around 46 BC, he had served as consul in 13 BC and had governed Syria successfully, where his primary challenges were political rather than military. Augustus appointed him governor of Germania in 7 AD, likely believing that the province was sufficiently pacified to require administrative skill rather than military genius. Contemporary sources paint Varus as a man more comfortable with ledgers than legions. Velleius Paterculus, writing with the bitter hindsight of disaster, described him as a man of mild character and quiet disposition, somewhat slow in body as he was in mind, and more accustomed to the leisure of the camp than to actual service in war. This assessment, while harsh, appears supported by Varus's actions during the crucial days leading to the disaster. In the late summer of 9 AD, Varus was encamped with his 3 legions somewhere along the Weser River, likely near modern-day Minden. The exact location remains debated, but archaeological evidence suggests a substantial Roman presence in the region during this period. The legions under his command were among Rome's finest. Legio 16, 17, and 19, had all served with distinction in various campaigns and contained a mix of veteran soldiers and promising recruits. According to Cassius Dio's account, written nearly 2 centuries later but based on contemporary sources, Arminius approached Varus with reports of a rebellion among distant tribes. He claimed that swift action could suppress this uprising before it spread, and he offered to guide the Roman forces through the shortest route to reach the rebels. Modern historians debate whether Varus was genuinely deceived or whether he suspected treachery but felt compelled to act regardless. The Roman military system emphasized aggressive response to tribal unrest, and failure to act decisively could be interpreted as weakness, a fatal perception in the volatile Germanic frontier. Whatever Varus's private thoughts, he ordered the march that would doom his legions. The route Arminius proposed led through the heart of the Teutoburg forest, a vast wilderness of dense woods, treacherous marshes, and narrow paths where Roman military advantages would be neutralized. Modern archaeological surveys of the probable route reveal terrain ideally suited for ambush warfare, exactly what Arminius intended. On September 9th, 9 AD, the exact date is debated, but September is generally accepted, the Roman column began its march into the forest. The force consisted of approximately 15,000 legionaries from the 3 legions, 3,000, 4,000 auxiliary troops, and 1,000 to 1,500 cavalry, along with camp followers, baggage trains, and civilian administrators, perhaps 20,000, 25,000 people in total. The column stretched for miles through the narrow forest paths, a serpentine line of men, animals, and wagons vulnerable to attack at any point. Varus, following standard Roman practice, placed his most trusted auxiliary units, including Arminius's own Germanic warriors, in advance and rearguard positions. This deployment would prove catastrophic. Chapter 3. The Killing Ground. The first 2 days of the march proceeded without major incident, though the Romans faced constant harassment from the difficult terrain. Dense undergrowth, muddy paths, and fallen trees slowed progress dramatically. The column became increasingly strung out, with gaps developing between units as faster-moving elements pulled ahead of the slower baggage trains. Cassius Dio provides the most detailed account of the developing crisis. They had with them many wagons and many beasts of burden, as in time of peace. Moreover, not a few women and children and a large retinue of servants were following them. One more reason for their advancing in scattered formation. On the second night, September 10th, disturbing reports reached Varus. Germanic auxiliaries began deserting in growing numbers, claiming they needed to return to their tribes to gather more warriors. Arminius himself departed during the night, ostensibly to coordinate with allied tribes ahead of the column's route. Modern analysis suggests this was the signal for the prepared ambush to begin. The third day, September 11th, brought torrential rain that turned the forest paths into muddy quagmires. The Roman column became even more disorganized as soldiers struggled to maintain footing while carrying their heavy equipment. Wagons became stuck, forcing lengthy delays as teams of men worked to free them. The normally disciplined Roman formation devolved into a chaotic mob, struggling through the wilderness. It was then that Arminius sprang his trap. Archaeological excavations at Calcres, identified in the 1980s as the probable battle site, reveal the sophisticated nature of the Germanic preparations. The tribes had constructed a camouflaged earthwork wall nearly 2 miles long, running parallel to the Roman line of march. Hidden behind this barrier, thousands of Germanic warriors waited with spears, javelins, and captured Roman weapons. The attack began with a shower of javelins and stones launched from concealed positions along the length of the Roman column. Tacitus, writing decades later based on survivor accounts and his father-in-law Agricola's knowledge of Germanic warfare, described the opening moments. The barbarians surrounded the Romans on all sides, and though at first they kept at a distance and hurled their missiles, yet, as no one defended himself and many were wounded, they approached closer and assailed them with their swords. The narrow forest paths made Roman tactical formations impossible. The famous testudo, tortoise formation that had conquered Gaul and Britain, was useless in terrain where soldiers could barely stand four abreast. Germanic warriors, intimately familiar with forest warfare, struck from unexpected angles and melted away before the Romans could organize effective counterattacks. Varus attempted to maintain order, but his commands could not be heard over the din of battle and the crash of falling trees, which archaeological evidence suggests the Germans deliberately fell to create additional obstacles. The various units of the column became isolated from one another, each fighting desperately for survival in their particular section of the killing ground. The Germanic coalition's tactics demonstrated sophisticated military planning. Different tribal contingents attacked specific sections of the Roman column simultaneously, preventing mutual support between Roman units. The Cherusci and their allies had studied Roman military methods during their service as auxiliaries and knew exactly how to negate Roman advantages. As the day wore on, Roman casualties mounted horrifically. The wounded could not be evacuated due to the terrain, and the dead could not be properly buried according to Roman religious customs, a psychological blow to the surviving soldiers. Equipment failures compounded the crisis as rain ruined bowstrings, made shields heavier, and turned the ground into a slippery morass. By evening of September 11th, the three legions had been reduced to isolated pockets of survivors, scattered throughout several miles of forest. Varus, wounded and recognizing the hopelessness of the situation, made the decision that would define his historical legacy. Chapter 4. The End of the Eagles. The archaeological record at Calcris tells a grim story of the battle's final phase. Excavations have uncovered scattered Roman military equipment, coins, and human remains distributed over a wide area, suggesting the complete disintegration of Roman military formation. Particularly significant are the discoveries of Roman cavalry masks, indicating that even the mobile units that might have escaped were caught and destroyed. According to Cassius Dio's account, the night of September 11th, 12 brought no respite for the surviving Romans. Germanic war parties continued to harass the scattered groups throughout the darkness, preventing rest or reorganization. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical casualties. Roman soldiers, trained to fight in disciplined formations with mutual support, found themselves isolated in a hostile wilderness where every shadow might conceal an enemy. Varus spent the night in consultation with his surviving senior officers, including legionary legates and auxiliary commanders who had not yet deserted or been killed. The situation was catastrophic beyond redemption. 3 proud legions had been reduced to perhaps 3,000, 4,000 effective soldiers scattered across miles of forest. The wounded numbered in the thousands, but had to be abandoned due to the impossible terrain and continued Germanic attacks. Velleius Paterculus, who interviewed survivors years later, recorded that Varus recognized the futility of attempting further resistance. When he saw that his troops were being overwhelmed, Velleius wrote, Varus, following the example of his father and grandfather, chose death rather than capture. At dawn on September 12th, Publius Quinctilius Varus fell upon his sword, choosing the traditional Roman death of honor rather than face the humiliation of defeat and capture. The death of their commander effectively ended organized Roman resistance. Some officers followed Varus's example, choosing suicide over capture. Others attempted to rally their men for final stands in defensible positions. A few units may have attempted to fight their way back toward Roman territory, but archaeological evidence suggests none succeeded in any significant numbers. The Germanic tribes showed no mercy to their defeated enemies. Unlike civilized warfare between Roman armies, where surrender was often accepted and prisoners could be ransomed or enslaved, this was a war of extermination. The Germanic coalition viewed the Romans not merely as military opponents, but as foreign occupiers whose very presence defiled sacred Germanic soil. Classical sources describe horrific scenes in the aftermath of the battle. Tacitus, writing in the Annals about a Roman expedition that visited the battlefield 6 years later, provided chilling details. In the center of the field were the whitening bones of men as they had fled or stood their ground scattered or piled in heaps. Near them lay fragments of weapons and limbs of horses and also human heads, prominently nailed to trunks of trees. The fate of the 3 legionary eagles, the sacred standards that embodied the honor and spirit of each legion, became a source of particular shame for Rome. These golden eagles, blessed by the gods and carried in countless victories, were now trophies in Germanic hands. The loss of military standards was considered one of the greatest disgraces that could befall Roman arms, and the recovery of lost eagles became a matter of imperial priority. Archaeological evidence from Calcrease supports the literary accounts of the battle's aftermath. Excavations have uncovered evidence of deliberate destruction and ritual desecration of Roman equipment and remains. Germanic religious practices apparently included offerings of captured Roman weapons and armor to their gods, suggesting that the victory was seen as divinely sanctioned. The few Roman survivors, probably numbering in the dozens rather than hundreds, were either taken as slaves or sacrificed in Germanic religious ceremonies. Some may have been kept alive specifically to provide information about Roman military plans and defensive positions. The Germanic tribes had learned from their victory and sought to exploit their intelligence advantages for future conflicts. News of the Battle of the Teutoburg forest through a fundamentally altered the trajectory of Roman possibly imperial expansion, who had been outside Augustus, the main column, who had dreamed of extending Roman the emperor's reaction to the Elbe River, as recorded and by incorporating all became Germania into the empire. He was so greatly affected, abandoned these that for several months in succession, the Rhine became his beard nor his northern frontier, and sometimes he would bash his head against a door, crying, "Remaining centuries Quintilius Varus, give me back my military consequences were severe. Rome had lost not merely 20,000 soldiers, but 3 entire legions with their accumulated experience, traditions, and esprit de corps. The numbers 17, Sotit, and 99 were never again assigned to Roman legions, a unique mark of dishonor in Roman military history. The loss of so many experienced centurions and officers dealt a particularly heavy blow to Roman military capability in Germania. Politically, the disaster forced a complete re-evaluation of Roman strategy toward the Germanic tribes. Future Roman commanders would approach Germanic warfare with greater caution and respect for their enemies' capabilities. The easy assumptions of Roman cultural and military superiority that had characterized earlier Germanic policy were permanently shattered. Arminius himself became a legendary figure, though his ultimate fate remained tied to the fractious nature of Germanic tribal politics. He succeeded in uniting diverse tribes against Rome, but could not maintain that unity once the immediate threat was removed. He was eventually assassinated by his own people in 21 AD, falling victim to the same tribal divisions he had temporarily overcome. The archaeological record at Calcrease continues to yield new insights into this pivotal battle. Modern scientific techniques have confirmed the scale of the disaster and provided details about Germanic military capabilities that complement classical literary sources. The site serves as a testament to one of the most complete military defeats in Roman history. The Varian Disaster marked the high watermark of Roman expansion in northern Europe. Never again would Roman legions march confidently through the Germanic forests with dreams of permanent conquest. The battle established patterns of Roman-Germanic interaction that would persist for centuries. Rome would defend its Rhine frontier, occasionally launching punitive expeditions into Germania, but never again would it attempt systematic conquest and incorporation of the Germanic tribes. In the end, the Battle of the Teutoburg forest demonstrated that even the mighty Roman Empire had limits. In the dark forests of Germania, 3 legions learned that imperial ambition alone was insufficient to guarantee victory over determined enemies fighting for their homeland. The eagles that had carried Roman power across the Mediterranean world lay buried in Germanic soil, silent witnesses to the price of imperial overreach.